In 1941, Theodor Adorno moved to Los Angeles. He was a refugee, a trained classical composer who had spent years fleeing the overt, violent fascism of a collapsing European continent. He found himself in a sunny, booming reality. The American dream operated at an enormous scale, fueled by an exploding consumer economy and an entertainment industry that defined the new century. Surrounding him was an industry that functioned like a literal assembly line. Studio lots produced films on rigid, predictable schedules, while radio networks broadcast identical programming into millions of homes. Popular songs followed formulas so strict that Adorno found he could predict the exact chord changes before the musicians even played them. Observing this beacon of freedom, Adorno saw something other than a triumph of liberty. He noted that the same mass production techniques used to build cars and appliances were now being used to manufacture human culture, suggesting a society being managed from above rather than one thinking for itself. The defeat of fascism brought a different kind of order to the West. Violent coercion had been entirely succeeded by a new system of aesthetic pacification, one requiring absolutely no visible force to maintain. To understand how this happened, we must look back at the original promise of the Enlightenment. The core idea was that human reason would be our ultimate tool to free ourselves from fear, myth, and the whims of unquestioned authority. This diagram represents instrumental reason. Human reason narrowed into a tool that calculates the most efficient means to an end, without questioning the end itself. Science and technology optimize production flawlessly within this loop, but completely bypass whether it serves genuine human value. When a society uses its collective intellect only to ask how instead of why, it builds a system that controls its subjects with total efficiency. The total control is so smooth that the people living happily inside it mistake their own managed existence for progress. This line of thinking began in 1923 at the Institute for Social Research in Germany. It started as a center for Marxist scholarship, trying to solve a specific historical mystery. Why did the workers' revolution that Karl Marx predicted fail to materialize? In 1918, the conditions for an uprising were present. Germany was a defeated nation with an exhausted working class. Communist uprisings briefly seized power in several cities. Yet the revolution was crushed, and a few years later, a large portion of that same working class supported the rise of fascism. The Institute's director, Max Horkheimer, observed that economic suffering alone had failed to trigger the predicted uprising. He realized that if the psychological consciousness of the masses is anchored to the existing order, the order can maintain itself without open coercion. This led to the concept of the culture industry. Adorno and Horkheimer argued that mass culture is not a spontaneous reflection of the people's desires, but a top-down system engineered to manufacture standard cultural goods. Through standardized cultural goods, like predictable Hollywood story arcs and formulaic pop songs, the consumer is trained to expect and accept exactly what the system provides. In this framework, amusement functions as an extension of labor. It provides the exact type of rest necessary for a person to return to work the next morning without questioning the cycle of their own life. Not everyone in the group shared this exact level of pessimism. Walter Benjamin held a cautious hope that mass-produced media, like photography and film, might strip art of its elitist aura, making it accessible and potentially politically useful. Adorno disagreed. He argued that the culture industry did not liberate art, it absorbed it into the machinery of advertising, turning aesthetic experience into a sales pitch. After the war, Herbert Marcuse expanded on this in the United States. He identified a psychological mechanism in consumer society called repressive desublimation. Historically, authoritarian regimes maintained power through strict prohibition. They denied human desires, which inadvertently generated the frustration and energy required for political resistance. Modern consumer capitalism maintains power by satisfying desires. It offers an endless array of commodified products for every urge, saturating daily life with entertainment and lifestyle choices that make dissent feel unnecessary. Under this system, even the impulse to rebel is neutralized. It is packaged and sold back to the public as harmless entertainment, fashion, or branding. Advanced capitalism achieves voluntary compliance by flooding society with so much total abundance that the capacity to imagine a different world eventually dissipates into consumption. The strongest challenge to this worldview came from Adorno's own student, Jürgen Habermas. He argued that his teachers had driven their critique of reason into a dead end. He charged them with a performative contradiction. If all reason is corrupt and instrumental, it becomes impossible to use reasoned argument to prove that the system is broken. You are using the very tool you claim no longer exists. This diagram illustrates Habermas's solution: communicative reason. He argued that the very structure of human language requires us to believe that truth matters, and the better argument should win. This type of reason is built into the way we talk to one another. The fact that we can read the Frankfurt School's critique and judge it freely suggests that our capacity for independent thought remains intact, even within a managed society. This critique applies to the algorithmic feeds that dominate contemporary life. These platforms are the ultimate evolution of the culture industry: standardized content, engineered for attention, with just enough cosmetic variation to sustain the illusion of choice. We easily spot the heavy-handed propaganda in a foreign state broadcast. We recognize the manufactured consensus, but we are often blind to our own sophisticated media framing. Take the Vietnam War. The raw reality of that conflict resulted in over 2 million Vietnamese civilian casualties. It was a war fought to prop up a dictator against his own population. Over the next 40 years, Hollywood focused the camera almost exclusively on the trauma and valor of the American soldiers. By centering the experience of the invaders, the Vietnamese experience was effectively erased. The frame did the work, ensuring the audience stopped asking why the war happened in the first place. True freedom requires moving past the identical choices offered by a platform and recognizing the invisible frames that shape those choices. It manifests in the capacity to use our own reason to finally ask why.